I never thought I'd be the guy telling this kind of story. I always read posts like this, shaking my head, thinking, that poor guy, what a nightmare. But now I'm that guy, and it feels like my whole world has turned into one big, sick joke. I don't even know how to process it, so I guess I'll just start from the beginning and let it spill out. My wife, Isolde, and I have been together for almost a decade, married for 6 years. We met in college, back when life felt simpler, and we were just two broke students who thought love and a shared plate of fries at midnight meant we could conquer the world. Isolde was the type of woman who lit up a room, effortlessly charming and always the center of attention. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world when she talked to you. And I fell for her, hard. I was quieter, more grounded, but she said that's what she loved about me, that I was her calm in the storm. I believed her. I believed in us. And for the longest time, I thought we were happy. Sure, we had arguments like any couple, but nothing serious, nothing that ever made me question what we had. Until, slowly, things started shifting. It started about 6 months ago when she got promoted at work. I was so proud of her. She had always been ambitious, and this was a big step forward in her career. But with the promotion came longer hours, late-night meetings, new responsibilities. At first, I brushed it off, convinced it was just the nature of moving up in the corporate world. But then, little things started adding up. She started dressing differently, nothing drastic, but enough for me to notice. More effort, more perfume, a new lingerie set that she claimed was just for her, to feel confident. Then there was her phone. She had never been secretive about it before, but suddenly, she started keeping it on silent, face down on the table, or taking it with her into the bathroom. If I walked by while she was texting, she'd subtly tilt the screen away, like I wouldn't notice. When I'd ask about her day, she'd give vague answers, ones that felt rehearsed, as if she was carefully curating what she wanted me to hear. Oh, just a normal day, you know how it is, or ugh, meetings, meetings, meetings. But she never had stories anymore, never told me anything specific. It was like a wall had gone up between us, and I didn't even know when it had been built. The real gut punch, though, came last Friday. We share an Uber account, something we set up years ago for convenience, making sure we could always get home safely after a night out. I hadn't checked it in ages because, well, why would I? But that night, something just felt off. Isolde had told me she was going out for drinks with her girlfriends, nothing unusual. I didn't think much of it at first, but as the hours ticked by, I started feeling uneasy. I texted her around 10, just a casual, "Hey, how's it going? What time do you think you'll be home?" She didn't reply right away, which wasn't that weird, but when she finally did, almost an hour later, it was a cold, distant still out. "Love you." No emojis, no playful tone, nothing. Just those words. And something about it sent a chill down my spine. She never texted like that. Normally, she'd send me a string of messages, telling me which friend was being dramatic or which bartender was hitting on them, throwing in a bunch of exclamation marks and laughing emojis. But this was different. This was off. I don't even know why I did it, but I opened our Uber app. Maybe I was just looking for reassurance, wanting to see that she really was where she said she was. But instead, what I found made my stomach drop. A ride had been taken at 9:47 p.m. Pickup location, some bar downtown. Destination, an apartment complex on the other side of the city. Not our home. Not near her friends' places. Not anywhere she had ever mentioned before. An address I didn't recognize. I stared at the screen, my mind scrambling for an explanation. Maybe she had gone to an after-party with friends? Maybe there was some logical reason she was going to a random apartment complex across town? But deep down, I already knew the truth, even if I wasn't ready to admit it yet. I clicked on the ride details, my hands trembling, praying that it was some mistake, that maybe the app had glitched or the address had been input wrong. But there it was, clear as day. Isolde had ordered the Uber herself, meaning this wasn't some accidental detour. This was intentional. A choice. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at my phone, feeling my heart pound so hard in my chest that I thought it might actually crack my ribs. The air felt thick, suffocating. I tried to tell myself that maybe, just maybe, there was a reasonable explanation. But my gut told me otherwise. My gut told me that my wife had just taken an Uber to another man's apartment. And suddenly, every suspicious moment, every odd excuse, every little change in her behavior came crashing down on me all at once. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I just sat there, staring at my phone, watching the minutes turn into hours, my mind looping through every possible explanation, every potential excuse that could justify what I had just seen. But no matter how many ways I tried to twist it, no matter how much I wanted to be wrong, there was only one conclusion. Isolde had gone to another man's apartment, and she had done it with intention. My body felt like it was buzzing with adrenaline, but I was frozen, unable to move, unable to think straight. At some point, I got up and poured myself a drink, hoping it would dull the sick feeling in my stomach, but it only made my hands shake worse. I must have checked the Uber app a dozen times, as if the address would somehow change if I stared at it long enough. It didn't. It stayed right there, mocking me, confirming what my gut had been trying to tell me for months. By the time Isolde finally came home, it was past 2 in the morning. I heard the front door open, the sound of her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, her keys jangling as she tossed them onto the counter. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might actually pass out. I stayed where I was, sitting on the couch, gripping my phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. She didn't see me at first. She was too busy digging through her bag, probably for her phone to check whatever messages she had missed. Then, finally, she looked up and saw me. Her whole body tensed for just a fraction of a second before she forced a smile. "Oh, hey, babe," she said, her voice overly casual, like she hadn't just come back from another man's place in the middle of the night. "Why are you still up?" I couldn't even respond at first. I just stared at her, at the slight smudge of lipstick at the corner of her mouth, at the way her hair was a little messier than when she had left, at the faint smell of cologne clinging to her clothes, one that definitely wasn't mine. She noticed me staring and shifted uncomfortably, brushing a hand through her hair like that would somehow erase whatever had just happened. "Isolde," I finally said, my voice sounding foreign to me, low and tense, barely controlled. "Where were you?" She blinked, then let out a little laugh, the forced kind, the kind people do when they're buying time. "I told you, I was out with the girls. We had a couple of drinks, just catching up." I cut her off. "No, you weren't." I watched as the color drained from her face, as the confident, breezy act wavered just slightly. She opened her mouth, probably ready to throw out some excuse, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned my phone around, the Uber screen still open, still showing the details of her ride. "Want to try again?" For a second, just a second, I saw it, pure panic in her eyes. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by something else. Not guilt, not regret. Annoyance. Like I was the one being unreasonable for catching her in a lie. "Are you seriously tracking my rides now?" she snapped, crossing her arms like she was the one who had been wronged. "That's really creepy, you know." I let out a humorless laugh, shaking my head. "Don't do that. Don't turn this around on me. You said you were with your friends, but this says you went to some random apartment across the city. So tell me, Isolde, who lives there?" She hesitated. It was barely noticeable, just the briefest flicker of hesitation before she spoke. But I caught it. "It was a friend's place," she said finally, her voice carefully controlled. "We were all hanging out, and then one of them wasn't feeling great, so I went with her to make sure she got home okay." I felt like I was going insane. "Really?" I asked, tilting my head. "Then why didn't you just say that in the first place? Why did you lie and say you were with the girls the whole time?" She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "Because I knew you'd react like this," she said, exasperated. "I knew you'd overthink it and make a big deal out of nothing, so I didn't want to deal with the interrogation. God, can you just relax for once?" Relax? I was barely holding myself together. My pulse was hammering in my ears, my vision blurring at the edges as the anger and betrayal crashed over me in waves. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but every word was sharp enough to cut. She scoffed. "Jesus, there is no he. You're being paranoid. I went to help a friend, that's it." She was lying. I knew it. I can see it in the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes, in the way her fingers fidgeted with the strap of her purse, in the defensive edge to her voice. But she wasn't going to admit it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And suddenly, I realized that no matter what I said, no matter what proof I had, she was just going to keep spinning lies, keep gaslighting me until I started to doubt myself. I had seen this play out before, in stories from other men, in cautionary tales I had never thought would apply to me. I took a slow, steadying breath, then stood up. "I'm going to bed," I said, my voice empty. She looked surprised, like she had been expecting me to keep pushing, to start yelling, to break down. But I was too tired, too drained. "We're not done talking about this," I added before turning away. She didn't say anything. Just stood there, watching me go. And as I walked up the stairs, my stomach twisted with a sickening realization this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up feeling like my body had been run over by a truck. My head throbbed from the lack of sleep. My stomach was in knots, and there was this dull, persistent ache in my chest that I couldn't shake. For a brief second, in that hazy moment between waking and fully coming to, I almost forgot. Almost. But then it all came rushing back. The Uber receipt, the confrontation, Isolde's smug defiance, the way she had looked at me like I was the one in the wrong. I rolled over and saw the empty space beside me in bed, the sheet still perfectly made on her side. She hadn't even tried to crawl in next to me at some point in the night, hadn't even pretended to want to fix things. That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even trying to act like she was. I found her in the kitchen, standing by the coffee maker, scrolling on her phone like it was just another day. She was dressed casually, hair still slightly damp from the shower, her face bare of makeup, just a normal Saturday morning look. But nothing about this morning was normal, and the sight of her standing there, acting like nothing had happened, sent a fresh wave of anger surging through me. She looked up when she heard me walk in, raising an eyebrow like I was the one being weird. "Morning," she said, like nothing was wrong. "Want some coffee?" I stared at her, waiting for something, an apology, an explanation, anything. But she just turned back to her phone, sipping from her mug as if we hadn't gone to bed with her lies hanging thick in the air between us. My jaw tightened. "Are we just going to pretend last night didn't happen?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She sighed dramatically, setting her coffee down with an exaggerated motion. "Oh my God, are we really still on this?" she groaned, running a hand through her hair. "I already told you. Nothing happened. You're blowing this way out of proportion." I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm even though every instinct in me wanted to shake the truth out of her. "Then tell me the truth," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Tell me why you lied. Tell me why you went to that apartment." She rolled her eyes so hard it was like I had just accused her of something completely absurd instead of calling her out on her very real, very obvious deception. "I did tell you the truth," she snapped. "I went with a friend, I helped her get home, and then I came home. That's it. You're making this into something it's not." I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening around the edge of the counter. "Which friend?" I asked. She hesitated. It was slight, just a fraction of a second, but I saw it. She had to think about it. She had to scramble. And that was all the confirmation I needed. "Maya," she said finally, lifting her chin in defiance. She wasn't feeling great, so I made sure she got inside okay. I almost laughed at how lazy the lie was. She hadn't thought this through at all. "Really?" I said, tilting my head. "Because I texted Maya last night." "You know what she said?" "That she went home around 10 because she had an early morning today. She wasn't with you. So try again." I watched as her face went blank for just a second, like her brain was rapidly flipping through possible excuses. But then she did what she always did, she doubled down. "Well, I meant after Maya left," she said, her voice sharpening with annoyance. "I was with her earlier, and then I went with another friend afterward." "Jesus, why are you treating me like a criminal?" I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. "Because you keep lying to me, Isolde. You lied about where you were. You lied about who you were with. And you're still lying right now. You can't even keep your own story straight." She groaned again, crossing her arms. "This is insane. I went out, I had a couple of drinks, I made sure a friend got home safe, and now suddenly I'm on trial? Do you even hear yourself? You're acting like I cheated or something." I stared at her for a long moment, my heart pounding in my chest. "Did you?" I asked quietly. Her reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't gasp or protest or look horrified that I would even suggest it. Instead, she laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a guilty laugh, an amused laugh, like I had just said the most ridiculous thing in the world. "Oh my God," she said, shaking her head. "You're unbelievable." I didn't look away. "Did you?" I repeated, my voice cold. She scoffed, grabbing her coffee and turning away. "I'm not even dignifying that with an answer. If you seriously think so little of me, maybe you should take a long, hard look at yourself and figure out why you're so insecure." Insecure. Insecure. That was her angle. That was her way out of this. She had been caught in a blatant, undeniable lie, and I was the problem? I felt something snap inside me, something raw and furious and beyond hurt. I had spent years loving this woman, supporting her, trusting her, and now, when the truth was staring us both in the face, she couldn't even pretend to care. She couldn't even try to make it right. I pushed back from the counter, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. You know what, Isolde? I'm done. She turned back, blinking. What? I'm done. I repeated, my voice calmer than I felt. I'm done sitting here and pretending like this is normal. I'm done listening to you lie to my face. I don't know who you think you're fooling, but it's not me. Not anymore. She looked at me like I had just grown a second head. Oh, for God's sake, you're being so dramatic. No, I cut her off. I'm not. You are. You're the one spinning stories. You're the one trying to manipulate me. And honestly, I don't have the energy for it anymore. I stepped back, shaking my head. I don't even recognize you. The woman I married wouldn't have done this. She wouldn't have lied to me. She wouldn't have treated me like I was crazy for wanting the truth. But whoever you are now, I don't want anything to do with you. Her mouth opened, then closed. I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes, the brief moment where she realized I wasn't playing along anymore. But instead of apologizing, instead of owning up to what she had done, she just folded her arms and narrowed her eyes at me. So what? You're just going to walk away? Over this? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Over this? No. Over you. Over the fact that I don't trust you anymore. Over the fact that you don't even respect me enough to tell me the truth. I stepped back, shaking my head. You already made your choice, Isolde. Now I'm making mine. I didn't wait for her response. I turned and walked away, feeling the weight of the last 6 years pressing down on me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't look back. I didn't leave the house right away. Maybe a part of me still wanted to give her a chance to come clean, to stop playing games, and just tell me the truth. Maybe I needed to see if there was any part of the woman I married still left inside her, or if she was already too far gone. But as the hours passed, it became painfully clear that she wasn't going to admit to anything. Instead of trying to fix things, instead of showing even a shred of remorse, Isolde did the opposite. She acted like nothing had happened. She spent the rest of the day moving around the house like it was any other Saturday, scrolling on her phone, watching TV, texting her so-called friends while I sat in silence, waiting for the inevitable. It was like I wasn't even there, like she had already written me off in her head, as if the years we had spent together could be dismissed with the tap of a screen. By the time evening rolled around, I had barely eaten, my stomach too twisted in knots to handle anything more than a sip of water here and there. Isolde, on the other hand, ordered takeout like she didn't have a care in the world, barely even glancing in my direction when she went to answer the door. The smell of food filled the kitchen, making my nausea worse, and I knew I couldn't sit there in silence any longer. I pushed back from the couch, walked straight to her as she unpacked the food, and said, "Are you really just going to pretend this isn't happening?" My voice was calmer than I felt, steady in a way that surprised even me. She sighed, barely looking up from the takeout containers. "What are you talking about now?" she muttered, as if I was the one exhausting her, as if she was the one being forced to deal with something unbearable instead of the other way around. I stared at her, almost in disbelief. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. You've been lying to me for months. You've been sneaking around behind my back, and now that I've caught you, you act like I'm the one being unreasonable." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Are you even going to deny it at this point? Or are you just hoping I'll get tired of asking?" She finally looked up at me, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes, guilt, hesitation, something real, but then, just as quickly, she shut it down. "I already told you," she said, slow and deliberate, as if she were explaining something to a child. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. You need to let it go." "Let it go," I repeated, stunned by how effortlessly she dismissed everything. "You want me to just pretend I didn't see the Uber receipt? That I didn't catch you lying to my face? That I don't know exactly what's been going on?" Her jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her composure. "You think you know what's going on," she snapped, tossing a fork onto the counter. "But you don't. You've built this whole stupid conspiracy theory in your head, and now you're just looking for reasons to be mad. I haven't done anything wrong." I clenched my fists at my sides, trying to hold back the sheer rage building inside me. "You haven't done anything wrong?" I echoed, my voice dangerously quiet. "So if I asked you to unlock your phone right now and let me see your messages, you'd have no problem with that?" I watched as her entire body stiffened, her expression shifting in an instant. That was it. That was the moment she knew she was caught. But instead of looking guilty, instead of panicking, she scoffed and shook her head, as if I was the one crossing a line. "Are you serious?" she said, her voice laced with disgust. "You actually think you have the right to go through my phone? What kind of psycho does that?" And there it was, the final manipulation. The last-ditch effort to turn the situation around on me, to make me look like the bad guy, to frame herself as the victim. She knew I wouldn't back down, so she did what she always did when she was cornered. She deflected, she shamed, she tried to make me question whether I was being unreasonable. But this time, it wasn't going to work. I had spent months ignoring my gut, months making excuses for her, convincing myself that maybe I was imagining things, that maybe I was just being paranoid. But I wasn't. I knew what was happening, and I wasn't going to let her gaslight me into submission. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You know what's funny?" I said, my tone cold. An innocent person wouldn't react like that. An innocent person wouldn't have a problem proving they weren't lying. An innocent person wouldn't need to hide anything. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. For the first time, she didn't have an immediate comeback, didn't have a pre-rehearsed excuse waiting on the tip of her tongue. She just stood there, silent. That told me everything I needed to know. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. "I can't do this anymore," I said, stepping back, feeling the weight of the last 6 years pressing down on my chest. "I don't even recognize you. You're not the person I married. Hell, maybe you never were." She blinked, her mouth opening again like she wanted to say something, but then she hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw it, the realization that I wasn't playing along anymore. That she had pushed too far, for too long, and now there was no coming back from it. For the first time, she looked afraid. Not of losing me, but of losing the control she had over me. I turned away before she could say anything, before she could try to reel me back in with another lie, another excuse, another attempt at twisting reality to suit her. I walked to the bedroom, grabbed the nearest duffel bag, and started throwing clothes inside. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stay here. Not with her. Not in the house we had built together, the house that now felt like nothing more than a prison filled with ghosts of the life I thought we had. She followed me upstairs, her voice sharp with frustration. "Oh, so that's it?" she demanded. "You're just going to run away? You're not even going to try to work this out?" I let out a hollow laugh, shoving a handful of shirts into my bag. "Work this out?" I repeated, shaking my head. "Isolde, there's nothing left to work out. You checked out of this marriage a long time ago. I was just too blind to see it." She huffed, folding her arms. "You're being dramatic." I zipped the bag shut and turned to face her, my expression unreadable. "And you're being a liar," I said simply. "We both know it. You just don't have the guts to admit it." For the first time, she looked genuinely at a loss for words. But I didn't wait for her to come up with another excuse, another attempt at spinning the situation in her favor. I picked up my bag, walked past her, and headed straight for the door. She didn't stop me. She didn't say a single word. She just watched as I left. Walking out that door was supposed to feel like freedom, like some grand moment of clarity where I finally took control of my life again. But the truth is, it didn't feel like that. It felt heavy. It felt like I was walking away from 6 years of my life, from a marriage that had once meant everything to me, from a woman I had once trusted with every part of myself. The weight of it all sat on my chest as I got into my car and started driving, not even sure where I was going. I didn't want to go to a friend's house and deal with their pity. I didn't want to go to a hotel and sit alone with my thoughts in a place that smelled like industrial-strength cleaning products and regret. So I just drove, letting the miles pile up between me and the life I had just left behind. At some point, I pulled into a parking lot of a 24-hour diner, the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and grease, where the waitresses looked like they had seen too much and had no patience for anything that wasn't straight to the point. I slid into a booth by the window, staring blankly at the laminated menu, not really reading the words. A waitress came over, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a kind smile, and without thinking, I just said, "Coffee, please." She nodded and walked away, and I sat there, feeling the exhaustion seep into my bones, the adrenaline finally wearing off, leaving behind nothing but emptiness. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the swirling patterns in my coffee, playing everything over in my head. The way Isolde had looked at me when I confronted her. The way she had laughed, like my pain was some kind of joke. The way she had refused to admit to anything, even when the truth was right there between us, thick and undeniable. And that was the part that hurt the most, not just the betrayal itself, but the way she had treated me like I was nothing. Like our marriage was nothing. Like I was just some obstacle standing in the way of whatever new life she was trying to carve out for herself. I should have seen it coming. I should have listened to my gut when things first started feeling off. But I hadn't wanted to believe it. I had wanted to believe in her, in us, in the life we had built together. And maybe that was the hardest part, realizing that the person I had loved, the person I had fought for, wasn't the same person standing in front of me anymore. Maybe she never had been. Maybe I had just been in love with an idea, with a version of her that had never really existed in the first place. At some point, I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. No missed calls. No texts. Nothing. She hadn't even tried to reach out, hadn't tried to stop me, hadn't even bothered to ask where I was. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. I wasn't dealing with a mistake. I was dealing with someone who had already let go long before I had even realized there was something to hold on to. I exhaled slowly, setting my phone down on the table. Maybe that was for the best. Maybe I had spent too long clinging to something that had already crumbled. Maybe, for the first time in months, I was finally seeing things clearly. Because the truth was, I deserved better. I deserved someone who wouldn't lie to my face, someone who wouldn't manipulate me into feeling like I was crazy for asking for the truth. I deserved a love that didn't feel like a constant battle, like a puzzle where the pieces never quite fit. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue, and for the first time that night, I felt something close to relief. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't closure. But it was something. A step forward. A breath that didn't feel so heavy. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know where I was going to stay, how I was going to untangle the mess of my marriage, or what my life was supposed to look like now. But I did know one thing: I wasn't going back. Not to her. Not to the lies. Not to the version of myself that had spent so long trying to pretend everything was okay when it so clearly wasn't. And maybe that was enough for now. The days that followed were a blur of half-slept nights, long drives with no destination, and an emptiness that settled deep in my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. I ended up crashing at my brother's apartment, a cramped one-bedroom that smelled vaguely of gym socks and takeout, but it was better than staying in a place filled with memories that now felt like poison. He didn't ask too many questions, just handed me a beer and said, "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out," and for the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't drowning alone. Isolde didn't reach out. Not once. No messages. No missed calls. No half-hearted attempts to explain herself. And that silence said more than words ever could. At first, it made me sick, like I had wasted years of my life on someone who didn't even care enough to fight for what we had. But then, slowly, I started to realize the truth. I had spent all this time believing that our marriage was built on something solid, something real. But in the end, it had been nothing more than a fragile illusion, one I had been too blind to see through. She had checked out long before I caught her, and the fact that she didn't even bother pretending to fix things only confirmed what I had been too afraid to admit. I spent the first few days debating whether I should be the one to reach out, whether I should demand an explanation, demand something from her. But what would that accomplish? She wasn't going to tell me the truth. She had lied right to my face even when she had been caught, even when she had no way out. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even ashamed. She was just annoyed that I had found out. And what did that say about our marriage? About her? A part of me had been waiting for some kind of regret from her, some sign that she felt something about what had happened, but it never came. And eventually, I realized it didn't matter. Even if she had apologized, even if she had tried to spin some last-minute excuse, I wouldn't have believed her. The trust was gone, burned to ash the moment she laughed in my face instead of owning up to what she had done. The legal process of separating was easier than I expected, which should have been a red flag in itself. When I finally got the nerve to text her and say we needed to talk about the next steps, her response was so casual it made my blood boil. "Yeah, let me know when and where. Let's just keep it simple. No fight. No resistance. Just a cold indifference that told me she had been waiting for this, maybe even hoping for it. The woman who once told me I was her soulmate, who stood in front of our family and swore to love me forever, now acted like I was nothing more than a business transaction she needed to wrap up. Sitting across from her during that meeting was the strangest thing I had ever experienced. It was like looking at a stranger, someone I had once known but who had long since faded into someone else. She looked good, put together, her hair perfect, her expression unreadable, as if she had already moved on and this was just a minor inconvenience in her new life. She didn't ask how I was, didn't acknowledge the wreckage she had left behind. Just sat there, pen in hand, signing papers like she was ordering takeout. I wanted to ask her why. I wanted to demand the truth, to make her admit what I already knew. But as I sat there, watching her flip through the documents with ease, I realized something. I didn't care anymore. Whatever she had done, whoever she had done it with, it didn't matter. She wasn't mine anymore. Maybe she never had been. Walking out of that office felt different than walking out of our house. That night, when I left, it felt like I was losing something, like I was stepping away from a life I had built, a future I had planned. But now, it felt like I was leaving behind something that had been rotting for a long time. I wasn't losing anything. I was freeing myself from it. The months that followed weren't easy. There were nights where I would wake up expecting to hear her beside me, mornings where I would reach for my phone, instinctively wanting to send her a message before remembering there was no point. Grief is strange like that. It doesn't hit you all at once, doesn't knock you over in a single blow. It comes in waves, small and cruel, hitting when you least expect it. But over time, the waves got smaller. The pain dulled. The anger faded. And in its place, something else grew: acceptance. Looking back, I don't regret leaving. I don't regret standing up for myself, for finally seeing the truth for what it was instead of what I wanted it to be. I lost something, yes, but I also gained something far more valuable. I gained clarity. I gained the knowledge that I deserve better, that I deserve honesty, that I deserve a love that doesn't make me question my worth. And maybe, just maybe, that's worth more than anything I thought I had with her. So if you're reading this and you're where I was, if you feel that gut instinct telling you something isn't right, if you're seeing the signs and trying to convince yourself they don't mean what you know they mean, listen to yourself. Trust yourself. Don't wait for proof that will only bring you more pain. If someone loves you, they don't put you in a position where you have to doubt them. They don't lie to your face. They don't gaslight you into thinking you're the problem, and they sure as hell don't let you walk away without a fight. I don't know what comes next for me. Maybe I'll meet someone new. Maybe I'll take time to figure out who I am outside of being a husband, outside of being hers. But whatever happens, I know this: I will never settle for less than I deserve again. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like that's enough.